1022tv.square.
Content, information, and opinions expressed during the related show are those of the show personalities and guest alone, and not those of Vic Canellis Media Group, its parent, affiliates, or stations. VCMG Live is not responsible for any content, information, or opinions expressed. User bears full responsibility for their reliance on such content, information, or opinions.
Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. With over 20 years of real estate experience and selling over 150 homes a year, Laura Sanders is the #1 RE/MAX agent in the state of Florida for 2021. Join us each week as we discuss how to make money through buying and flipping homes, to renting versus selling, and everything in between. To join the conversation, call in live 888-994-4995, Studio A.
Hi, welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Every week we talk about something that will help you make a little money, maybe even save a little money, or just help you navigate this crazy world that we live in, which has been pretty crazy, I have to say. Real estate market is changing every day. Interest rates are over 7%, and we're just trying to figure out, how do we get to the next deal? Today, we're going to be talking with Nick Fiorello from JK Closings, and we're going to be talking about disclosures. What is it that the agents are responsible to disclose? What are the sellers responsible to disclose when it comes down to doing these deals? Welcome, Nick.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, there's a lot of things that go on every day in a transaction, right? First, you got to find the buyer, right? Or you got to find the seller. Now you find the seller, you find the buyer, right? Now you have to do what's called using what is it called? It's called care, diligence.
Care, skill, and diligent
Okay.
effort, diligence, any of those.
Okay. And let's talk about if I had a buyer, right? And what that means when disclosing about anything about a property. If you have a buyer and you're selling a buyer a home, what is the real estate agent's responsibility?
So you're saying if you are the buyer's agent, the selling agent.
Correct.
All right. When you're a agent anyway, regardless of what side of the transaction you're on, you want to make sure that the seller or the seller side is going to give you a seller disclosure. That is a document that's provided by the Florida Bar and Board of Realtors that kind of points to all of potential issues or items that could be a potential issue on a home. You as a buyer's agent can obtain that from the listing agent or from the seller at the time, you make the offer, prior to making the offer, or put something on the contract where it'd be contingent on accepting that disclosure, so the buyer is aware of any known issues on the property.
Okay. So are we required by Florida state law to provide a seller's disclosure?
No. The only thing that is required under Florida law is a seller must disclose any known issues that materially affect the value of a home or the property. So any issue that would reduce the value of the home or make a property less desirable, those that are known would need to be disclosed by a seller.
So I was reading that if a seller completely repairs something, right, it's fixed, that they don't have to disclose that. Is that true?
If something is not an issue anymore, then not necessarily. I'm under the belief that everything such as something like that you're being said should be disclosed, just because the more disclosure, the more CYA there is for everyone involved in the transaction, because then nobody can say that there was anything hidden at that point. Everything was disclosed. So if something is fixed, then it's not a issue that materially affects the value of the property, because that was an issue was repaired or fixed. So at that point, it's not necessarily needing to be disclosed. But to be 100% transparent and to CYA just in case that wasn't fixed properly, then that might be an issue that affects the value of the property. Let's say that there was some plumbing that was fixed that wasn't done correctly, and maybe it is leaking and you know about it as a seller, that it might not be 100% working to function. It is something that can materially affect the value of the property, and it should be, even though it was fixed, it might not have been fixed 100%, should be disclosed.
Okay. So I guess, what if somebody's selling a property that is on a canal, right? It's a waterfront property, so now it's got a seawall. Is it the buyer's agent's responsibility to tell the buyer to inspect the seawall?
Well, the contract kind of provides a couple of different disclosures already on behalf of a seller, and it also puts the responsibility on a buyer to do certain things. As a buyer's agent, how are you supposed to know the condition of the seawall, or how are you supposed to know to tell them to, um, you know, review or inspect the seawall? Yes, they probably should, and yes, you probably should tell them to. It's their decision at the end of the day to do their inspections. That's why they have an inspection period allotted to them in the contract. But the contract also provides a disclosure for, this isn't necessarily to do with the seawall, it has to do with flood zone and elevation certificates and stuff like that. But if they're on a canal, they might be in a flood zone. And if they're in a flood zone, that might make them think to inspect that seawall. If that doesn't is not structurally sound, what impact will that have with the property? When a buyer's doing an inspection, it's best to inspect everything to do with that property and the structure, the soundness, everything, and that includes like the boundary lines as well.
So when a buyer negotiates for repairs, would you agree or would you not agree that once negotiations have happened and they are aware that possibly there's mold and they've gotten some sort of compensation for that, that it's really on them if it was more work than what they thought?
Oh, 100%. So let's go back, to the start of something in that nature. If the seller doesn't know anything, they don't have to disclose anything. So if they don't know of an issue that materially affects the value of the home, then they don't obviously need to disclose anything because they don't know. They only need to disclose what is known. So in that case, when during the buyer's inspection, if the buyer finds something that may materially affect the value of the home, then they have the right during the inspection to either ask for a credit or back out of the contract if it's within the inspection period. And then if they decide to move forward with that contract, accepting a credit, like you said, after something has been found during their inspection while they were doing their due diligence on the property, and they accept a credit and move forward towards closing in lieu of terminating or in lieu of having that repaired by the seller, then yeah, that's on them and up to the negotiation aspect as to what they need to repair, if not repair, or if they're assuming that issue in full, then it's up to them to fix that or finish any changes that need to be made after the fact.
Right. So when a buyer says, well, I wanted to cancel the contract, I mean, how they would have to provide saying that, consider this my cancellation of contract, please send me a cancellation for me to sign.
Yeah, so a buyer during their inspection period, the contract says that the buyer has within the inspection period to do whatever inspections they want or shall desire on the property. And then if a buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion, that means the buyer's decision only, for whatever reason only, that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate the contract by delivering written notice of such election to seller prior to expiration of the inspection period. So if they
Okay.
provide something in writing, the contract provides that a text is not a valid way to do that anymore. So it has to be an email, or unless somebody's handing over a written letter. But you don't want to wait for that. You want to make sure that it is official and swift. So an email would suffice, and the buyer can terminate the contract that way.
So a buyer saying something to the effect of, I wanted to cancel the contract, but the agent wouldn't let me, is really not an excuse, because that buyer would be able to provide an email showing that they sent that to the agent saying, consider this my cancellation. Not where it says, I'm canceling if you don't give me a credit of X.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has to be clear that there are, they determine that in their discretion, the property is not acceptable to them, and then they are, because of that, terminating the contract.
So when essentially after the inspection period or during that time, an additional addendum is signed for credits, that shows that the buyer had negotiated for their inspection and are essentially accepting the contract in the as-is condition with credits.
Yes, so they haven't canceled the contract or terminated the contract within the inspection period, and in lieu of that, they are accepting the credit to either, take care of it themselves, or sometimes the sellers repair things for them. But that's up to the negotiation at that point. It would really be, if they were moving forward, they move past that inspection period, they're moving past the inspection period, and they're moving towards closing.
So tell us a little bit quickly, because before we go to commercial break, tell us who you are, what you do, what's a great way to get a hold of you.
My name is Nick Fiorello, as I was introduced earlier. I'm an attorney with JK Closing Attorneys. We do everything related to real estate closings and transactions. You can contact me by calling 954-779-5000, or you can shoot an email over to Nick, N-I-C-K, at jkclosings.com.
Awesome. So we're going to go to commercial break, but when we come back, what I want to talk about with Nick is I do want to talk about a little more about how this affects us, and can somebody try to turn over a sale? Because that's a new one I've heard of, and I'd love to know more about that. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
At JK Closing Attorneys, we do all of the same things that a title company does, but with the benefits of being a law office. We can help with residential real estate, short sales, commercial real estate, refinances, 1031 exchanges, and FIRPTA withholding.
Contact JK Closing Attorneys today at 954-332-3111. Again, that is 954-332-3111.
Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building your dream home, you have a lot riding on your loan specialist. Max Fish, a top 1% mortgage loan officer in the nation, will give you a same-day qualifying quote. Max Fish is committed to providing his customers with mortgage services that exceed their expectations. Ensuring that you make the right choice for you and your family is his ultimate goal. Contact Max Fish today at 954-729-6933 or max.fisch@nwmcorp.net.
You have been watching Making Money with Laura. For more information, contact Laura Sanders at 954-650-0827 or visit her website at theloracell.com. And now back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. So today we're talking about disclosures. What do we need to disclose when buying a home? Does the listing agent need to do disclosures? Does the buyer's agent need to do disclosures? That's what we're talking about here today. We're also talking about, can a sale be overturned once it's like kind of like a rescission period? Can that happen? And what is the likelihood that that would happen? So what we're going to do is see what Nick has to say about that, but at the same time realize that what is our liability? So have you heard of this ever, Nick, where somebody's trying to turn over a sale?
Just recently I did. I don't know how it would play out in court. I'm not sure about all of the, certain facts behind that and what a court would say with a lawsuit for reversal of a sale. What I think logically could happen is if a suit of that nature were to take place, that if there were known issues that can be proven to be known by a seller that materially affect the value of a home, then instead of a reversal of a sale, they might consider damages or quote unquote damages as the difference in the property value of the sale amount versus what should have been the value of the home.
But what if you had an appraisal, right? Let's just say the buyer had an appraisal and the appraisal comes in $200,000 over the sales price.
Yeah, I mean, the appraisal is, the value of the home pursuant to that, appraiser doing the appraisal at that time.
I mean,
So,
is that why the contract says that it's an as is? Because, now my brain's starting to think, well, okay, what if I'm selling to an investor who's buying to flip this? And what if it ends up, because they know everything, right? And they end up buying something that takes more work than they're expecting and they don't make a profit. So now they come after the realtor or they come after the seller? I mean, where does this stop?
it's on the buyer, and the buyer, as I said earlier, the contract provides a lot of different certain built-in disclosures for a seller. Radon gas permits, mold, flood zone elevation certificate disclosures, lead-based paint disclosures, and seller disclosure. Even it specifically says in the contract that both parties sign that the seller knows of no facts materially affecting the value of the property which are not readily observable and which have not already been disclosed by the buyer, or by the seller to the buyer. So if there's nothing disclosed, then the contract's automatically assuming that the seller doesn't know of anything that materially affects the value of the property.
So if a buyer's getting a mortgage, right? Let's just look at this for a second. And there's repairs needed on the property. Most times, repairs are not sent to the bank. Most times, credits are not written as repairs. They're written as closing costs and prepaid credits. Is that defrauding the bank?
If a bank is requiring repairs to be made, then
Not
they're
the bank
going
requiring repairs. The buyer's requiring repairs, and they're not sending these addendums to the lenders. Is that defrauding the bank?
Yeah, definitely. Everything should be provided to all parties involved. Like I was saying earlier, as much as you can disclose to everybody involved will CYA everyone in the transaction. So if a seller knows something, they should be disclosing it. If a listing agent knows something because the seller told them, they should be disclosing it. Same with the buyer's agent. Same with the buyer to their bank. If they know about something, they should be disclosing it to be 100% transparent and to CYA.
Well, that makes sense. Before we're not running out of time quite yet, but what would you suggest is the way things should be handled? Like when an agent has a buyer, do you suggest that they have some kind of a form that he signs that says that these were the inspectors that were recommended? Or, it's just kind of crazy, how you protect yourself.
It's always good to provide a couple different suggestions if you are an agent, not just one. So not to steer people to one particular person, let them do their due diligence if they are completely lost in the woodwork. So if you have a couple different options, a couple different inspectors, if they ask you for suggestions, a couple different, appraisers, whatever it may be. So then they can do their diligence. They can talk to all of them. They can make an educated decision whether they want to go with one of them or their own that they find after speaking to those people. But at the end of the day, a home inspector might miss any issues. An appraiser might miss any issues. You as an agent might miss something. Us as real estate professionals, anybody in the industry could miss something. And really, like, this comes down to the seller disclosing a known issue. And if they don't, how do you prove that they did know it previously? A seller is not obligated to disclose any defects that are open and obvious, like a hole in the wall or a cracked window or something like that, because that's readily observable. The buyer in their inspection should be able to find that. Something that needs to be disclosed is a latent issue that materially affects the value of the property. And latent means something that cannot readily be seen during a normal inspection. And that normal inspection is something that a buyer should be doing when they purchase a property.
But do you think that a seller would actually give a worker that's worked on their house that would then later say, oh, they knew that there was something wrong? I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
No, I mean, this is something that's extremely hard to prove and to find out. Like, how are you going to know that somebody knew something unless there's something that is in writing shows that they knew that? But, a seller might unintentionally not disclose something, might forget something. But at that point, it's like, okay, was it known? Or how do you decide what's known? How do you even know what materially affects the value of the property? Because if you have a several $100,000 house or a multi-million-dollar house, and there's something that is a $3,000 repair, does that necessarily materially affect the value of the property? It's a little subjective when you're thinking about it that way. So what exactly is something that materially affects the value of the property? Obviously, if the house is riddled in mold and riddled in termites, then that's different. But if it's something that is, a minor electrical thing that can be fixed for $2,000 and you have a $2 million house, is that something that materially affects the value of the property or not?
That's a great question, Nick.
Well, it's like I said, now it's time to analyze that, and that's a subjective thought. To me, something that's $2,000 worth of repairs isn't necessarily something that materially affects the value of a $1 million house. A $1 million home versus a $999,000. Going all the way there. What's the difference in that $2,000 at that point?
Do you feel like
So
the home inspector, when a buyer hires a home inspector, that they should be somewhat responsible to tell them, hey, you're on septic, you should go ahead and, that's another thing. I mean, in order to inspect septic, you actually have to empty the septic tank.
yeah, I mean, I know a lot of home inspection companies or home inspectors that don't necessarily do certain things that other people do. I know of, some home inspection companies that bring in a plumber and they send a camera down all the pipes to make sure that they're all clear. Not every inspector does that. And there's a certain standard of care that an inspector must have when they inspect a property, but there's not, certain definites that are done every time. You kind of pay for what you get.
Right.
So if you
Well,
want,
I know that one of the home inspectors that I use very often, he looks up and sees it's on septic and says, you're on a septic. Do you want that inspected? Hey, this house was built in 1968. Would you like us to scope the lines? Hey, would you like a mold test, right? Would you also like us to go and check for termites? So they give you a list of it. So to me, it's like if you're a buyer and you choose your own home inspector, right? You don't use any of the recommendations that we've made. To me, I would assume that they're making these recommendations just like my guy does.
yeah, you would assume so, and especially with the mold. I mean, the contract it's almost kind of it's funny a little bit because it says specifically in there the buyer has the responsibility to contact an quote unquote appropriate professional to search for mold. So it's putting the complete onus on a buyer to hire the correct person or to retain the services of a company that will do that, quote unquote, that appropriate professional.
Right. Well, we always have to remember the whole reason why we're here is number one, I want to get out the word that I am one of the best realtors out there, in my opinion. And I'm always looking for new sellers, new buyers, anybody that's looking for some help in this industry. So also looking for agents to come join our team, looking for assistance as well. So anybody knows that anybody's looking, definitely give me a call. Laura Sanders, RE/MAX Direct, 954-650-0827. Again, Laura Sanders, RE/MAX Direct, 954-650-0827. And I guess until next week, we've got Nick. He'll give you one more time how to get a hold of him.
Yeah, again, it's phone number is 954-779-5000, and the email is nick, N-I-C-K, at jkclosings.com.
And like always, thank you so much for listening and streaming with us at Making Money with Laura Sanders. Until next week, see you then.
Thank you for tuning in for Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827. Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. We look forward to seeing you.